Looking at sustainability, we've sort of touched on this area before on the show, but with the COP17 summit coming up in Durban next week, we thought we'd invite Daniel Kinnear, who's the Senior Executive Associate at the Africa Strategy Group, and Seydou, Kane, the Business Development Leader at DuPont, into the studio to talk about sustainability issues. This huge summit coming up, everyone flying out from all over the world, using a huge amount of carbon to fly here. And are we going to achieve anything here, guys? Realistically,
it's a tough call. I think this negotiations happen at a time when the globe is in a major transformation. New governments in Greece, in Italy, recently in Spain, the ongoing Tahrir Square. There's a heck of a lot going on out there, Jeremy. And I think that the challenge is that if we couldn't even get Doha around, which is on trade, I think the chances on COP17 are, it's going to be a tough battle. And as we talk, there are drafts going back and forward, and there is no common ground.
Seydou, your take on it?
Well, indeed. I mean, in these economic times, it's a very challenging period for governments and businesses to take the lead on this issue. But from a business perspective, if I may, Jeremy, I would say that I think that we as business need to take the lead, and that's why DuPont has been consistently pushing actually this sustainability agenda.
I think that's probably where we're going to come back to right now, is because governments don't really do a heck of a lot. I mean, they're politicians. They've got their own agendas. It's going to be up to business to drive this entire issue of sustainability. And there is a shift in mindset in business around sustainability, particularly from a purchasing point of view.
Well, I fully concur with you. Not only from the purchasing point of view, but actually the main point here is that collaboration, only collaboration is going to take us through. Business alone can achieve so much. But we will need actually the government push and collaboration throughout the value chain and with all the stakeholders to get there.
Yeah, I think also, you know, it's important to, if we think of the top 100 economic entities globally, 63 are corporations, not even nations.
Okay.
So I think to move this agenda forward, I think as you're alluding to, it's indispensable that business takes the lead, if for anything, for its own survival. I think the issue also is that, as we recall, probably in the 80s, the word sustainability was used more about the bottom line, keeping your business on track for as long as possible, generating profits, paying your taxes, and creating employment and investing in R&D. Back in later, about 10 years later, Gro Brundtland, who was the former Prime Minister of Norway, published a report called the Brundtland Report. And she took hold of the word sustainability and brought it into the multilateral government sphere and spoke about sustainability as a premise for development, creating sustainable growth without too much waste, refining your supply chain. And I think fundamentally governments have lost control of this process, because the positions I think that they could possibly take in Durban, most of them will take positions that the lobbies will tell them to take.
Yeah.
So business, again, is influencing the regulatory space, the multilateral space. So it's an interesting
but there is a crossover there as well, guys, because, for example, the Public Investment Corporation in South Africa has laid out, and that's one of the biggest investors in South Africa, has laid out social responsibility structures that they will invest in. I mean, the JSE has got the SRI index, which started in sort of 2006, I think it was. And the amount of companies now, it's about 75% of the companies who apply to be part of that index are actually getting onto the index. So business is moving it forward. How do we then push government?
That's a critical question, indeed. But what I can say is that from our perspective, from a business perspective, what is the very important message to take through is that it is possible to grow by actually respecting those criteria and respecting the environment. And again, I'll take back to the example I know best, which is DuPont, indeed. But we reduced. I mean, you alluded to the Bratland, exactly. It was in '87, if I am correct. So as of 1990, DuPont entered this actually journey. I would call it a journey to sustainability. And our track record actually is a proof that it is possible to do it. We reduced our absolute energy use by 6% while increasing our production by 40%. So it is a saving for the bottom line because we save more than $6 billion, I think, in terms of energy expense. But at the same time, what we did as well was to expand, working with our suppliers and customers to develop as well products that contribute to sustainability.
Now, you see, that's where it's going to come down to at the end of the day. We can sit here and talk until we're blue in the face about sustainability. But when it starts hitting the bottom line of companies, that's when they're going to have to make changes.
You're absolutely right, and I think that sustainability is almost a chain, a value chain of both the social environment, the economic environment, to some extent the heritage environment. But I think more than anything else is that because of the financial crises that we've experienced in the last 2 to 3 years and the economic slowdown, government has moved not only from being the regulator creating the legislation. Government has moved to the boardroom as shareholders when bailing out these large corporations. So government finds itself in a rather ambiguous position at the moment. So who is going to take the lead? And I believe that business can take the lead. I share your sentiment that but also business must get real, because we also have this thing called greenwashing, which is, let me report on a few things I've done for a little community, planted a couple of trees. And that's cool. And so
I've done my bit.
I've done my bit. And therefore, at the stock exchange or using the index, they call it greenwashing. And I think the clever business, who are led by visionaries, who, like Christopher Columbus, when he headed out to the New World, he didn't know where the heck he was going to, but he had a vision. And his people got him there because he shared that vision. But they didn't know where the heck they were going to and what they were going to find. And unless business adopts the same sort of mantra and says, let's move this thing forward, forget about the science of it, it really makes good sense, good business sense. Because at the moment, governments are trying to protect jobs. You're never going to find any government signing on, the United States least of all, signing on to Kyoto. We won't maybe not even get an extension on Kyoto, for the simple reason that they're protecting jobs.
Well, we touched on it earlier. I mean, the world has changed radically since the first sit-down where people started talking about Kyoto.
Yeah.
There's been a massive shift. You've now got India, which probably wasn't even a blip on the radar when Kyoto was first mentioned. Brazil. How are they trying to bring in those nations, the new developed nations and developing nations, who are probably huge carbon emission generators? Are they actually engaging with them?
Well, and that's where you're getting into the nitty-gritty of COP17, basically, because different countries have different agenda. And when bringing 100+ countries and locking them in a room, asking them to get to a consensus, it's very difficult. You alluded to India or China. Indeed, when you take a historical perspective, their environmental footprint is actually minimal when compared to the impact of the current developed countries as the US, etc. So they will fight more for equity, saying, hey, wait a second, let's look at the perspective. It's not just because we are emitting a lot right now, that we have to pay the cost actually, or the price for those changes. And on top of it, countries like China would argue that 35% of our emissions are actually product that you ask us to manufacture for you. So basically, mind it from your side and help us reduce our own footprint.
So basically,
so it's very tricky.
Everyone's blaming everybody else.
Yeah. And you have as well dramatic situations like countries like Maldives, you know, which are really fighting for this because it's a notion of survival. You know, with the rise of oceans, Maldives literally could disappear in 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
So it is very difficult to just put everybody on the same line and try to get a consensus. And that's why it's going to be, the complexity as well with the economic situation is going to make it even more difficult for everybody to get, let's say, compassion or whatever.
But then how do we weight these different countries? You know, how do we try and get some sort of balance here so that at the end of the day, whenever that day is, because it's not going to be next week in Durban, but at the end of the day, how do we get some form of consensus? Because at this stage, we're sort of just sitting around talking and nobody's getting anywhere.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I think we lost the plots. The primary movers of governments lost the plots on climate change. They put it into a silo. What we see now is that, talking to the point you raised of the Maldives, it is also a national security issue because people are concerned about refugees. And if we look at what is happening between Kinnear and Somalia, that is a consequence of the political strife in that country and the inexistence of institutions, but also the transboundary movement of people. And what happened if Al-Shabaab embeds itself in that exodus, so to speak, it could destabilize nations. And I think that when we put climate change into the silo, we have the scientists come into it, and there's a lot of skeptics out there about the implications of climate change, of carbon emissions. And I think that we are finding ourselves grappling at straws at the moment. For example, there is a great attempt by Minister Manuel, along with his counterparts, well, his finance counterparts in Mexico and Norway, recently drafted with a large committee of 25 countries on either side, the Green Climate Fund. And how do we fund this thing? Guys, we haven't even got an agreement that we recognize that it is a threat. You know, now we're talking about the financing, and that is confusing the space.
You see, it's coming down to, we all talk about sustainability, but it's not just sustainability. It's political security, it's food security, it's a whole host of issues that fall under this umbrella, and we'll try and unpack some of those in just a moment. Stay with us. We're talking about sustainability in business. Is it sustainable?